Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, relatives of Zimbabwe's late ex-president Robert Mugabe head to Singapore to pay their respects. The 95-year-old passed away there last week. His body is due home on Wednesday, and there's still speculation as to whether his relatives will snub the government by refusing to let Mugabe be buried in Harare. We hear from our correspondent in the country. Also, the birthplace of the Arab Spring is gearing up for its second democratic elections since the revolution of 2011. This weekend's presidential vote in Tunisia was preceded by landmark televised debates. But despite the discourse, many voters remain disenchanted with the political process. And as hundreds of thousands of hectares are destroyed in Madagascar every year by slash and burn agriculture, the government says it's struggling to deal with the powerful and shady business network driving demand for land. Desperate farmers are torching protected forest in search of new fields on which to grow corn and peanuts. But first, relatives and Zimbabwean officials attended a mass for Robert Mugabe in Singapore on Tuesday. The ex-president ruled Zimbabwe for 37 years until his ouster in 2017. He died aged 95 in the Southeast Asian state last Friday after a long illness. Now, Mugabe's body is due to be returned to Harare on Wednesday ahead of a huge funeral ceremony planned for this Saturday. But it's still not clear where he'll actually be buried. Despite his years of tyrannical leadership, he was, at the start of his career, a famed liberation hero. Some family reportedly want him buried at his rural home in Kutama village. And if he isn't interred there, the government wants him to be buried at the National Heroes Acre in Harare. And if that doesn't happen, it will likely be seen as a snub to President Emerson Mnangagwa and his ruling party. Well, Ryan Truscott joins us now with more from Zimbabwe. Ryan, so why would some of Mugabe's relatives want him to be buried at the National Heroes Acre?
Well, there are some family members and political allies who don't want that. They are still bitter over the treatment of Mugabe in 2017 when he was forced to resign. And about a month ago, a newspaper here ran a story quoting family members saying that Mugabe didn't want to be buried at the National Heroes Acre in Harare, and that he didn't want the government or President Mnangagwa to preside over his burial. It was reported that he wanted to be buried in a Roman Catholic cemetery in his rural village of Kutama, next to the grave of his mother Bona. On the other hand, we hear that some members of the family are willing to concede to a state funeral and to allow him to be buried at the Heroes Acre. There is a space there next to the grave of Mugabe's first wife, Sally, and it's long been speculated it was being kept especially for Mugabe. So at this stage, there appears to be no agreement over the final resting place of the former president. And this evening, one local independent news website was saying that there are various factors that could even delay the burial, which had been scheduled for Sunday. One is that Grace Mugabe is said to want a separate mausoleum built for her husband if he's to be buried at the Heroes Acre. The other is that ruling party supporters want a chance to pay their last respects, and that may entail carrying Mugabe's body to all of the country's 9 other provinces before it's buried.
So what are the government's plans for what happens to Mugabe once his body is back in the country?
Well, cabinet ministers held a press conference today, and they were asked about this issue and whether there would be any postponement of the burial. The information minister, Monica Mutsvangwa, said that there's nothing extraordinary about these delays in fixing the details of a funeral of this kind. The foreign minister, Sibusiso Moyo, says consultations are taking place with family members and that these should be concluded when they get back home from Singapore tomorrow. There's certainly no confirmation of any postponement. Even if the burial is postponed, as far as we know, the funeral service at a stadium in Harare should still go ahead on Saturday. But there may be some other factor that could see a delay in the actual burial. It was due to take place on Sunday, this Sunday the 15th. That also happens to be President Mnangagwa's 77th birthday, and it may be that he doesn't want to bury his predecessor on his birthday. But at the same time, he is said to be going to travel to the UN General Assembly in New York later this month. So presumably he'll be wanting to get this issue settled before he leaves.
Thanks very much, Ryan Truscott, there for us in Harare. Look now at some news in brief. South Africa said that it's going to crack down on the hiring of undocumented foreign workers. The announcement's part of the response to a wave of xenophobic violence in Johannesburg and Pretoria, in which 12 people have been killed this month. Overseas businesses and nationals were targeted by rioters in part because many poorer South Africans blame immigrants for the country's high unemployment rate. That currently stands at about 29%. The UN is asking member states to contribute to the evacuation of hundreds of refugees and asylum seekers currently trapped in Libya after Rwanda agreed to take a substantially sized group. Altogether, an estimated 4,700 people are being held in dire conditions in Libyan detention centres. Reports of abuse many suffer include accounts of beatings, rape and forced servitude. On Tuesday, Kigali accepted to take an initial group of 500. Flights are due to start over the next few weeks. Burkina Faso says that 6 policemen have been killed in an attack in the north of the country. A group of officers was reportedly ambushed by gunmen on Monday in Djibo town in Soum province. A day earlier, 29 civilians were killed in 2 attacks in the province of San Matenga in the north. The country's been struggling with a spike in Islamist violence since 2015. Now, Tunisians will be voting this Sunday in their second ever presidential election since the revolution. Over 24 candidates are vying to replace President Beji Caid Essebsi, who passed away in late July, causing the election to be moved forward by 2 months. Well, on Monday night, the country held the last of 3 nights of presidential debates. Cafes were overflowing with viewers. Our correspondents were amongst them and sent us this report.
The final preparations and the final countdown for a historic first in Tunisia's young democracy. A presidential debate broadcast live on national television. Over the course of 3 nights, over 24 of the race's candidates took turns facing off on stage.
Believe me, even I, as the channel's director, don't know what questions are going to be asked.
A political milestone that was followed by crowds across the country.
It's good that there are young people watching the debates, because there are some who didn't want to vote. But now they'll be able to hear the candidates, and that should motivate them to go and vote and choose a candidate according to their political platform.
Watching the debate allowed me to develop my ideas. I was able to listen to the candidates, see how they move and express themselves, see how they could represent Tunisia.
It's good that the candidates all answer the same question. That way we can better compare their ideas and see their differences.
The debate also drew attention and admiration from Tunisia's neighbours, notably Algeria.
As Pope Francis left Madagascar this week, he made a plea to protect what remains of the country's forests. Once it was called the Green Island. Now it's more often referred to as the Red Island because of the colour of the naked soil left behind when foliage disappears. 90% of Madagascar's forests have gone, mostly sacrificed to slash and burn agriculture. Menabe in the west is particularly badly hit, particularly since demand for peanuts spiked following a price boom back in 2015. About 200,000 hectares of forest go up in smoke every year. Our correspondent Gaia Borja and Pierre Couval sent us this report.
Flames greedily devour forests on one side of a major highway. It's a familiar sight in this region. Every year, the land is torched to make way for cash crops. This part of the island used to be lush with forests, but no more, and the destruction is getting worse. We are in the heart of a protected forest. It's now off limits to most. The trees that are left are little more than charcoal.
That's a clearing from last year in front of us. They come here to grow corn. Everything has gone up in smoke except those few trees left. You can see here, even the trees are all burnt down.
Unemployment and population growth contribute to the savage deforestation. But an increasing demand for peanuts and corn from the food processing industry has fed the frenzy. Thousands of Malagasy who fled drought in the south are eager for work here in the west. Raulson has been clearing land to feed his 14 children. He accuses one MP of exploiting him by buying each kilo of peanuts for 25 cents before selling it on for 3 times that price.
The Chinese buy from him. He's the one who sends collectors here to buy our peanuts and corn. His name is Jeannot. What he does is not right. He takes advantage of us simple farmers. Since he has been working with the Chinese, he has become a billionaire.
The MP didn't want to comment. A powerful elite controls the trading of cash crops here. Claims of exploitation have also been levelled against Tar, Madagascar's biggest brewery. It's linked to one of France's richest families.
There are reports that Star Company buys corn from collectors, and there's competition between farmers because those who produce more are offered gifts from the company.
Stars declined our invitation to be interviewed. Years of intense slash-and-burn harvests deplete soil and see farmers illegally setting fires to plant new crops. The government has blamed shady busy practices for encouraging the destruction, but it claims it lacks funds to tackle the worst of the forest fires. The fear is that at the current rate, Madagascar's Menabe's dry forest could be gone in just 5 years.
Well, that's it for In Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.